Hello, welcome back to the Whisky blog of Whisky Tour Guide Keith, but let's be more informal, just call me Keith. This is a whisky review I'm doing for you today, and the whisky that I have decided to review is this one here. Whisky aficionados will be well aware that this is from Lagavulin, and this one in particular is the Lagavulin 16 years old. I tend to refer to this as the Rolls Royce of Scotch whisky, so what better way to start my whisky reviews. I'm going to read you the bottle. I'm going to find out first of all what Lagavulin say about themselves before I tell you more about what I think. So lovely packaging, very sort of almost quite regal, understated, a little bit of class about it is the first impression you get with Lagavulin. Established in 1816, almost certainly they were making whisky on the site of Lagavulin long before that, 70 plus years maybe before 1816, but officially it's now just over 200 years old. So Lagavulin, Islay single malt, age 16 years old, loch water running over rocky falls, barley malted over moorland peat, slow distillation and long maturation in oak casks, all help us to shape Lagavulin's robust and smoky character. Time, say the islanders, takes out the fire but leaves in the warmth. So you start to get the impression with Lagavulin. Nice and rich, peaty, smoky, quite intense. Many believe that this is one of the oldest distillery sites in Scotland. Lagavulin is a little village where the distillery is, and the meaning Lagavulin comes from Gaelic, and the meaning in Gaelic pretty much translates as the hollow where the mill is. Today the 4 onion-shaped stills at Lagavulin are neatly tucked into a whitewashed jumble of buildings by the sea on Islay's rocky southern shore, guarded by the imposing ruin of Dunyveg Castle. Now, it is indeed a ruin. It's not much more than a pile of bricks now, Dunyveg Castle. Every time I go and visit Lagavulin, there are less and less ruins to see. Every winter seems to take its toll. Dunyveg Castle, all sorts of history associated with the castle, and one of the most famous residents, if you like, of the castle was the Lord of the Isles. Now this was like an early contender towards the kingship of the whole of Scotland. The Scottish king ruled the mainland, the Lord of the Isles ruled these islands. I don't know if you can see, I'll just move this just for a second. The Lord of the Isles ship, a little bit of the mainland, but most of the islands. And here is Islay down here. So the Lord of the Isles actually gathered his power together and supported the Scottish king for the first time in the year 1314 at the Battle of Bannockburn, a real seminal battle in Scottish history. And all the clans, all the different subsets brought their boats, gathered at Dunyveg Castle, and then set sail for the mainland to join up with King Robert I, Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king, who then went on to defeat the English king Edward II at Bannockburn. So right outside Lagavulin you've got this hotbed of history as well. What else does it say on the marketing stuff? There's nothing hurried about life on Islay or about dark, intense Lagavulin, which receives the slowest distillation of any Islay malt, then spends 16 years in old oak casks before being bottled. Pungent and potent, this is the great Islay malt, with richly peaty, deep, smoky flavours. It has an intense, long, ambrosial finish. Now I had to look up ambrosial to see what it meant. It's not a term I use too often, and it just means sweet, pungent, maybe a little bit florid. So you notice it. I think it's it's nice, and you notice it. So that's what it says on the box, on the carton. So I'll get some Lagavulin out now. You can see I've nearly finished this Lagavulin. Hopefully I've got enough for a tasting. Now on the bottle, much the same, as I say, it's 16 years old, so older than your standard age statements. For a long time this was pretty much the youngest Lagavulin. Other standard age statements from distilleries will be at 10 years old or 12 years old, but 16 years old, the longer in the cask, the more intense flavour. So it is generally richer, and it's a little bit more elegant, a bit more rounded, a bit deeper than your standard single malts. Hence why I referred to it as the Rolls Royce of Scotch whisky. Now, probably as much as anything because of the age, it might be a little bit of marketing as well. If you're looking to buy a bottle of Lagavulin 16, it comes in a little bit more expensive than your standard single malt. Standard single malts, usually in the UK, in Scotland, you'll pay around about £40, 35, 40, £45. The Lagavulin usually is around about 50, 55, maybe £60. So a little bit more expensive, but very well worth it in my opinion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Islay, the island where Lagavulin comes from. Islay is classed as its very own whisky region. There are 9 distilleries on Islay. This is seen as a bit of the sort of the benchmark of Islay whiskies, as I mentioned. It's like sort of peaty and smoky. Islay whiskies are renowned for their peatiness and their smokiness. Peat's like sort of an earthy fuel, and that's what they use when they're malting the barley most of the time in Islay. So Islay whiskies, there are exceptions to the rule. Some are more peaty than others, more smoky than others, but Islay is generally renowned for its peaty, smoky whiskies. I've mentioned it before. Take this lid off any Islay single malt really, and the whole room starts to smell quite quickly of that pungent aromatic smokiness. So Lagavulin, 16 years old. Recently, I think it was around about the 200th anniversary, they released one or two, or they added one or two single malts to their core range. I think you can get an 8-year-old now, there's a 12-year-old, and there was recently a 9-year-old sort of limited release as part of the Game of Thrones collection. So there are younger versions of Lagavulin available, and I think another one in the core range is the Distiller's Edition. We'll talk about that another day. I could talk about that for a very long time, but today we're talking about the 16 years old. So that's a little bit about Islay. The distillery itself, lovely distillery. It's almost everything you would want in a distillery. It's old, the whitewashed buildings, it's right on the coast, in the bay overlooking the old ruins of Duniveg Castle. You can take a walk out to the castle and get the classic shot back towards the distillery that's got Lagavulin written there on the sea wall. I believe in the old days when the boats were delivering barley or taking barrels or bottles away to market, so they could tell which distillery was which. So the iconic Lagavulin, if you leave, or I suppose if you arrive on Islay by the ferry into Portellen, a little village just a mile or two along the road, you can see the Lagavulin distillery as you sail along the coast. When you go into the distillery, for me it's got a real feel, it's like an old school. It's sort of wood panels and quite small, there's not much room, little corridors, real sort of nice leather chairs, little sort of nooks and crannies, maybe like an old railway station would have once been like. So it's got a real oldie world feel, really nice feel. The distillery is today owned by Diageo, who have more distilleries in their portfolio than any other company. So they are a big worldwide conglomerate, faceless corporate, all that sort of stuff. But the distilleries they've bought, including Lagavulin, they try as much as they can, I think, to try and retain what's so special, what's so unique about those distilleries. And Lagavulin, the buildings certainly still have that oldie world charm, the old world feel. Now I'm over in Islay quite often, once a month usually, normal times, and I'm in Lagavulin obviously as well. I've been there lots of times. If you do get the chance to go, they've more recently opened a little tasting bar, the Malt Mill bar, and you can try their core range and some of the distillery exclusives or limited editions that they've got in the shop you can try there. lovely little place to try whisky. Do nice little hot chocolates as well, which is good if you're driving. One of the great things that's almost a must do if you go to Islay, when I say that it's probably no longer available, is what was the legendary warehouse tasting. You're in the warehouse in Lagavulin for a start, so you've got the angels share the whisky moisture in the air swirling about. You've got all the barrels that go into things like this, the Lagavulin 16, and the tasting was hosted by one of the bona fide Islay whisky legends, a man called Ian MacArthur, known locally as Pinky. And Ian's warehouse tastings, I think he'd worked for 50 years when he was retiring, I think 2019, maybe 2020. And what he didn't know wasn't worth knowing. He'd worked at Portellin, he had relatives that had worked at Lagavulin, at Lafroig, just in with the bricks, as we say, regarding Islay whisky, and especially Lagavulin. So, lovely distillery, reeks of age, over 200 years old. That's a school feel, the railway station feel, the wood panels, the old wood leather chairs, the sort of classy design, just a really nice place to go and visit. More recently, Lagavulin came to a bit more prominence, maybe especially over in America, because it is the preferred tipple of a comedy character called Ron Swanson from the Parks and Recreation comedy, or comedy series, I suppose you'd call it, played by Nick Offerman. So Ron Swanson, straight talking, no flannel, no flim flam, and Lagavulin 16 was his bottom line when it came to drinking whisky, Scotch whisky. Time to take it out of this glass and put it into this glass. Got a beautiful little stem glass here that I procured at Lagavulin on one of my many visits. Very classy, nice little logo as well. So, see how much there is. Hopefully, a decent dram. Just enough. Good, good. And you know what this means? It just means need to buy another one now. So I'm going to taste this for you. First of all, on the nose, obviously the nose is very important. I can already start to, it's coming for me already. And then I'll do a little tasting in the mouth. Where else are you going to taste, I suppose? And then I'll describe the linger, the after, if you like, the finish. And after that, I've got some water here. Try not to knock over my lamp. And I will, a bit sacrilegious to have a Lafroig jug for a Lagavulin tasting, but my favourite little jug. So I'll taste it neat. I'll nose it, I'll taste it neat, tell you about the finish, and then I'll try it with a little bit of water as well and see what we get. Now obviously I've drank a bottle, I've drank more than a bottle in the past. It's got a little special affinity for me as well, the Lagavulin 16, because my good lady wife bought me a bottle of this for my 40th birthday. And you're all now going, he's over 40? Yeah, how hard as it is to believe. I am indeed a couple of days older than 40. Right, enough of the nonsense. So, on the nose. Straight away, it takes me straight back to the distillery. Now usually when I'm there, I'm driving, because I'm there with a group of visitors, tourists, and they're doing the tasting, they're pushing their alcohol levels up, and I am driving them about. So, but that said, on the nose I can smell the distillery straight away. And what you get, it's not too intense. A lot of people who like your standard whiskies, they often think that the Lagavulin is very smoky, it's quite intense. It's rich for sure, and there is certainly smoke there. A little bit of sweetness, just a little bit, but it's a sort of rich sweetness, quite full bodied. You know that you're dealing with something quite elegant. And what I get, you get that. It's hard, it's strange to almost smell the saltiness, but what you get with the Lagavulin, the type of smoke, there's that saltiness coming through, and I've described it before. It's almost like having people talk about maybe a bonfire smoke smell, and the maritime, the marine flavours or scents, if you like, coming through. I've described it as like having a bonfire on a beach, and the bonfire is an old boat. So you've almost got the resinous, the varnish, the paint smells, as well as the salty old wood. I want to be on the beach at Lagavulin right now, burning a boat. That's what I want to be doing, but here we are. So, lovely on the nose. You almost get, as well, it's the sort of rich, it's like having a barbecue on your bonfire. You've almost got a little bit of meatiness. Like, say you had a smoky, meaty joint, a sort of rich ham, smoked ham joint, or sort of barbecue and a steak, and really sort of rubbing the salt, the sea salt into it. So that's what you're talking about on the nose. That's what I get on the nose anyway. So pour yourself one, have a little sniff of it, see if you can get any of that. So you can sniff whiskey all day, it's lovely, but next we're going to have a little taste in the mouth. So the first thing, it's almost like a bit of a wall. You get a flat hit of the real sort of charred smoke, charcoal, smoky. It's not too dirty. Something like maybe the Ardbeg, the Lafroig, the 10 years olds. There's a real, almost a sort of barn, a warehouse floor feel to the charred smoke. But this is a lot cleaner, I would say. Smoother. It's certainly there in quite a bit of abundance. But you get the full depth, the full flavour. There's a lot of flavour to it. Very well rounded. You can taste the age. You know, it's not young, it's not sharp, it's not lacking, it doesn't disappear. It's still in my mouth. It's still everywhere. Sometimes a whiskey will come and go, reappear, disappear, but it's just hanging about there. There's a little bit of spice. You've got that heat. Again, it's not burning. Oh, it's good. A bit of sweetness as well. You've got the real sort of rich, fruity, syrupy. So you're talking sort of dates and figs. Sort of that unctuous, thick, syrupy sweetness. Again, there's nothing light, there's nothing subtle about the Lagavulin 16. Definitely got the smoke. You've got that peatiness, classic Islay. You've got a bit of the oak as well, obviously the barrel that comes in a bit underneath. Absolutely lovely, absolutely delicious. If you don't like smoky whiskies, I get it. If you do like smoky whiskies, this is an exceptional one. Often when I'm on the bus and I'm taking tourists around and I'm introducing myself and finding out about them, obviously I'm asking, what's your favourite whiskey? And I don't know, a third of the time people will mention, well, this is when we're going to Islay, people will mention the Lagavulin 16. Absolutely delightful tipple, a delightful dram. So, I'm going to drink it again, but I'm going to try and it's still lingering, quite a long aftertaste. I can start to feel it now. It's coming down a little bit. Some whiskies are almost like a bit of a dagger, a bit of a knife going right down your gullet, and you can feel them. But this one's just slowly, almost that sort of honey sweetness. It's embracing me rather than engulfing me. Still a bit of smoke. It's a lot gentler. Again, not too overpowering, nice and rounded, nice and full. So a lovely sort of lingering aftertaste. Still got that wee bit of a spice, a wee bit of in the mouth, a bit of heat, but again, nothing overpowering, nothing that's too much. So I'm going to add a little bit of water now, just purely for tasting purposes. I'll talk about this in the tasting tutorial, how to taste a whisky, how to get the best out of a tasting. But purely for the tasting purposes, I'm going to add just that minuscule amount of water. And I always say an absolute minimum of 2 drops of water and an absolute maximum of 2 or 3 drops of water, just to try and release some of that flavour. So it's not very sophisticated what I'm using here. It's a little teaspoon, upside down, 1 drop at a time. Tell you what to do. One, 2, go for the 3, go crazy. So just 3 drops of water there, and it's always amazing how much of a difference that little bit of water makes to the flavour. So let's see, sometimes very little, sometimes quite a lot. So see what I get off this. My lungs just aren't big enough to keep breathing that in, it's so nice. Much the same, but just that, as I say, it's like the Lagavulin tasting room, it's just exceptional. So it's almost taken a little bit of the sweetness away. It's still that wall of smoky charred charcoal, charred wood. I'd say it's a little bit more intense now. The that burning, not the burning sensation, but the burning flavour. A little bit more of the syrupy sweetness, the date, the fig, the raisin sweetness that I was talking about, that thick, almost like your Christmassy fruits, if that's the right way to describe them. Winter. Certainly, you're not really going to have this on a Caribbean beach necessarily. You're looking for, this is giving you a bit more warmth, a bit more coziness, a bit more sustenance. There's nothing light about this. It's a big thick warm rug around you on a windy, noisy beach, rather than something you're going to gently sip as you paddle through the soft lapping waves of a Hawaiian beach or Indian Ocean or somewhere. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit lighter on there. It leaves you a little bit quicker with the water in it. But I think it does intensify the smoke somehow as well. Okay, well, I'm not going to make you watch me drink all of this. I am going to drink all of it, don't worry about that. And then I'll have to buy myself another bottle of it sooner rather than later. The final thing I'm going to say in this tasting, something I'd like to add for all my tastings, is little recommendations. If you like this whisky, then what other whiskies should you look for? Or if you can't find this whisky, what other whiskies might be available wherever you are that you can get your hands on? So the obvious one would be the Laphroaig 10 years old. Now the Laphroaig 10 years old, it's much less sophisticated than the Lagavulin 16. I tend to say that the Laphroaig is a bit more like a slap in the face. It's quite in your face, but it's certainly got the smokiness. It's next door to Lagavulin, so very similar ingredients. You've got the cross-pollination of workers between distilleries in that area, so similar enough. Look for the Laphroaig 10 years old. Another whisky to think about. You've got Lagavulin on one side, you've got Laphroaig on the other side, you have the Ardbeg distillery. Now obviously you have the 10 years old, I've got the 10-year-old Ardbeg up here, but maybe a bit more comparable to the Lagavulin 16, maybe something like the Ardbeg Ugadal. Ugadal, now you'll see a jumble of letters, again it's a Gaelic word. I think Ugadal is the loch where Ardbeg's water comes from originally, but Ardbeg Ugadal is a really nice, smoky, intense Islay whisky, and it being the same bracket as this. The Lagavulin Distillers Edition, I can't wait to review that for you. One of my favourite whiskies. It was previously a Whisky of the Year that I've had, and that's another one. It's a bit more expensive than the 16. The Lagavulin Distillers Edition is effectively the Lagavulin 16, but it's then aged for the last sort of 3 to 6 months in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. So it's just like this, but it's just a little bit mellower and a little bit sweeter, maybe a little bit richer. So Lafroig 10, Ardbeg Ugadal, or the Lagavulin Distillers Edition, I think would be 3 whiskies. If you like this, you're looking to find something else, same sort of ballpark, that's what to look for. So, all the best. I'll leave you now. Buy some Lagavulin, drink some Lagavulin, and it just leaves me to say, finally obviously, Slán Java. Cheers.